Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage. Sitting next to me, you've seen it in the background of the last couple episodes, I finally have all the parts. This is the Car Wizard's 1978 Ferrari 308 GTB. Now, David, the Car Wizard, picked this up from Tavares where he had used it during the filming of the CarTrek Ferrari special, where Ed and Tyler drove their cars for over 1,000 miles and I trailered Freddie's Ferrari for 980 miles. He hardly drove it. For good reason. He didn't spend any time getting it ready, and I had 3 days and none of the parts I needed to get the carburetors happy. But none of that matters because it is now fuel injected. David and Daniel San, one of his mechanics, spent a lot of time getting this thing kind of perfected. They've got that cannonball interior pulled out of it with a nice correct interior for it. They have purchased their Hawaiian shirts to be Magnum PI and then installed a new fuel injection system to replace those carburetors to get modern drivability and reliability. But the problem is, as soon as they installed it, the company that manufactures the parts went out of business, and it doesn't make sense. Now, for computer programmers, or just a good analogy is, imagine just pretty much everything under the sun uses a particular language, coding language, communication language, or basic just numbers for how an engine should run, and then you have the computer that's in it that uses something that really doesn't make much sense. Now, I have been tinkering with fuel injection all the way back to the incredibly early Motec days where it's a 2D DOS table. You go around, you have bar graphs, not the magical, really nice 3D graphs we have today. And I couldn't make sense of it. I know there's gonna be tuners out there, probably a lot of you in Australia where the Tech 3's from, who understand its language. The problem is just no one near David, no one near me, we don't speak it. So we are going to be pulling all of those brand new parts out and installing, in my opinion, one of the best, most user-accessible fuel injection computers on the market. Holley EFI, Holley Performance, they have been a fantastic channel partner, and when I started talking with them about this idea, one, they admit, yes, this is not a supported application, but they also supported the idea and my argument that as long as you give the computer the correct signals of crank position and cam timing, it doesn't matter what the engine is. So rather than just kind of being delegated to LSs and Coyotes and the modern Gen 3 stuff, if you run the correct cam and crank signals, you can run anything on a Holley computer. So I'm incredibly excited about that. But that's enough talking about the parts. Let me come pick you guys up and we're gonna go over to the table and take a look at them. And then, you know, we have a Ferrari in the shop. Let's do some gratuitous beauty shots of the Ferrari and we'll be getting to work. Oh, sorry guys, you caught me during lunch. Factor 75 is an important tool that I keep in my shop. Been working really hard at losing weight. You guys are commenting and noticing it, and balanced meals is a big factor of it. What I love about Factor 75 is they send you pre-packaged, well-portioned, and delicious meals. And when it's time for you to take that 2 seconds that you have to eat your lunch while you're working, you throw it in the microwave 2 minutes, put it on a plate, or just eat it from the bowl, and you are good to go. Whether you're looking for keto-friendly, vegetarian, they have tons of options. Jump on the website. If you order using code questionable50, you get 50% off your first order. And they have tons of add-ins. Like, I love these in-between meal shakes. They have lots of hydration, and they just keep you full to get you through the day. Links down below, questionable50 when you check out, save 50% off your first order. I'm gonna finish this before it's cold. All right, let's go over to the table of Holley goodness, where we've got all of the things that I'm really excited to install on our 78 GTB to make it modern. So first off, I don't have all the ignition coils. We have just the 4 here. We are going to be installing LS remote mount style coils. This is going to have way more spark energy than we need. You know, more is better, right? We've got one of our awesome MSD solid state relays. I love these things. They're incredibly robust. work really good. And of course, we've got our complement of sensors, coolant, intake, air. We are running both a fuel pressure and engine oil pressure sensor. What that's gonna let us do is set up a fail-safe that if for whatever reason it drops fuel pressure or drops oil pressure, we can cut the engine off and protect it, because, you know, a blown up Ferrari engine, even on an old 308 GTB, is not a good day. We have got just a big box of different wiring harnesses, a universal harness, as well as specific injector harnesses and ignition harnesses that we will be modifying slightly. Now, Holly says don't ever modify their wiring harnesses. And when you're using the correct application stuff, you really should just run them as they provide them. But, you know, disclaimer, I'm a professional idiot and I'm gonna do what I want. And I know what I am doing, but I don't want to necessarily say, hey, you guys do it too. If you understand wiring, electronics, and why something is a certain way, maybe you can modify it. But otherwise, follow Holly's instructions, drop them in as they go, so that way you can get just that insane plug and play reliability. But we don't have an application for a 308 GTB yet. Maybe this will be a new thing, right? All right, so next to the pressure sensor, we have a cam angle sensor. Now, when you're running fuel injection, you have multiple ways of doing it. Really, it comes down to the simplest being batch fire or sequential fire. And when it's batch fire, what is happening is you only can tell the computer where the crank is. You don't have a way to confirm and measure what the camshaft's doing. So every time your engine rotates over, especially in the V8 applications, but you'll see it in the V6, any even fire engine, there's gonna be two pistons coming up at the same time. So when you're running only batch fire, only a crank trigger, your injectors fire for half the time, but they do it every time that piston's up. So they will actually be spraying fuel against the closed valve because it doesn't know when that valve is opening. Wanting to bring this car into the modern era, we are gonna, build a custom mount. I'm starting with their big block cam trigger mount assembly, and I'm gonna modify it. I don't know if we're gonna go off the cam gear or something else. I was actually thinking is that's an old air pump drive. Might put a collar on that and put my magnet in there to trigger it. All that matters is whenever cylinder one is top dead center, ready to fire, that's when that triggers. So we can use, even though that has nothing to do with cylinder one, we can use that as our positioning homing signal as long as we time everything. So that's gonna be a little bit of figuring that we'll need to do. And along with the super modernization, we're installing two widebands, one on each bank. So that way the computer is gonna be getting active feedback information, and sometimes you'll have half an engine running a little leaner or richer. So we will be able to have the computer monitor that and say, hey, you know what? Our even cylinders, for whatever reason, they're running with a little bit too much fuel, and we can set up actual corrections and pull a little bit of fuel just on the even banks. And then our final piece de la resistance. I think that's what you're supposed to say. I either sounded really fancy or really stupid. The biggest, most exciting piece of the puzzle is our Holley HP ECU. So you have seen me run the Terminator on Johnny. You have seen the Dominator lightweight red on our drag car. And this is something that kind of fits in the middle. This is an aluminum case ECU, whereas the Terminator is generally plastic, and it is fully potted. This thing is designed to be in difficult environments, potentially exposed to, moisture. You want to always insulate and take the best care of the ECU that you can. It runs on the Dominator style software, so there's a lot more capability. What's also great with Holley is when you're trying to figure out what you need, they have tech lines, they have really smart salespeople that you can reach out, let them know your goals, your power levels, and your setup, and what you may end up doing in the future with the car, and they can really help you pinpoint down and get the best computer option for your ride, for your swap, for your race car. I'm super amped that they agreed to send me this stuff so I can do something really crazy. And I believe we'll say it right here. This is gonna be the world first Ferrari on Holley EFI that I could tell. Disclaimer based on 15 minutes of Google research. So tucked in the back here is that Tech 3 computer that Daniel-san got installed and got the wiring done up pretty well. This is a long cable just for the tuning side, I believe, probably a wideband controller. We'll be pulling that. We'll be pulling, I believe, this whole harness through here. Comes out, and again, did a real nice job through here coming in. That is, I don't know, that's something Ferrari there. We're mostly just disconnecting all the wiring and building some sensor mounts, and that'll be the bulk of it. The fuel pressure regulator working great. We will swap out that mechanical gauge for the computer's electronic gauge, and then if we come around here, we'll be able to see it better once it's in the air. But this is the crank sensor wiring going down to a custom trigger wheel that is set up as, if I remember, it's a 60-2. And what that means, 60-2, is roughly every 10 degrees, well, not roughly, pretty much precisely, every 10 degrees of that crank pulley is a tooth, except for -2. That is the homing sensor area where they actually have it solid for that 20 degrees of rotation. So there's actually a 58 teeth on the trigger. So the computer is gonna see the signal coming from the trigger. That's when the computer knows it is basically home. We need to give it a second home signal when it's at top dead center on the camshaft as well, so that way it's able to fire injectors and ignition independently, which is gonna revolutionize this whole setup. That's what we got to work with. We'll discover a little bit of wiring, I'm sure, as we're coming apart. So we're getting ready to do some real advanced stuff. But before any of that happens, it's time to tear it all down. Well, all right, let's get you caught up on everything that's been happening on our Ferrari. Now, first, I do need to address something. Some of you have probably been yelling at the screen and have already commented when I made reference at the very beginning about our cam sensor being on bank 2. I was wrong. I remembered incorrectly, and I found the diagram as I was getting ready to start wiring the injectors and our ignition system. This is our bank 1. Ferrari does number them very weird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't know why they do that. It's also got a very weird firing order that we'll go over when it is time. But we now have an injector harness built. I am very pleased with how this came out using the WireCare product, and we've got a beautiful injector harness built out. We have our ignition harness built out. We've got the coils. Now, if some of you are asking, why did I not mount those for there? There's nowhere really good against the bulkhead that I could have built a mounting bracket. There's a lot of dead air in that area as well, which is gonna make the coils run hot, which is not good for them. So they all live in the back, and we've got our wires made and run. And yes, those are zip ties as my wire separators. It's hard to beat the zip tie separators. You do one loop and one in between each one, and they work great. And it's 100% custom. You put them exactly where you want it, so you can get the wires to run precisely how you want. The next big thing is wiring up our crank sensor. we need to run the sensor wires out into where they live and finish up our mount here for the cam sensor. This camshaft is precisely 18 millimeters, so I was able to get an 18 millimeter collar, which is going to allow me to mount the magnet trigger to it. I am now just trying to decide how we want to mount the cam sensor. Still going off the original idea of potentially mounting this here. Building a standoff that will go to those bolts, and then boom. The problem is I'm already almost fully maxed out in our adjustment, which is going to create some problems if we needed to get this any lower. I could possibly build off this ear and bolt it down so we don't have to do anything too crazy, or I may not use this initial piece at all and build something completely custom. And once we get that mounted, then it's just wires and then it's tuning. But what's going to be really cool, and I am really excited, is we're going to go in the software, we're going to use the wizard and tell it this engine has this displacement, it has a fairly radical camshaft, here's the firing order, and I am like 99.87% sure the map it gives us, the car will fire up and run on. So, but before I can do that, I gotta get this cam sensor built, that mount built, so let's get started on that. All right, I think we have finally found the solution that we want for our cam position sensor, flying magnet, and where we're gonna mount it. Now, we had been playing on the back side of the engine, looking at different collars. I got a couple in, spent a lot of money on collars, and they're not doing what I want them to do. So I decided to go back to plan A, or I guess whatever comes before A. There's not a letter there. But I was wanting to do something on the aluminum cam cover. We've got it pulled off right now, and there's sufficient area on the face of the cam gear to drill and tap it for this little guy. Come on, camera. There we go. So that is a magnet embedded in the middle of this bolt, and whenever that passes by our cam sensor here, that sends our signal to the computer to let it know where home is. Now, its positioning is fairly important, as is your crankshaft position sensor positioning. I have it off right now, but come on, we can focus in that hole. You can see these raised teeth here. This is what we talked about earlier, the 58-2 trigger wheel. So there are teeth every 10 degrees. And our cam position home is very important. Holly actually has a really nice simple chart here to help calculate everything. There's a lot of math, but real simple. We have 8 cylinders, so we want to be approximately 195 degrees before top dead center. Now that works great with modern aftermarket crankshafts and crank pulleys that have marks everywhere on it. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But what we do have now is that trigger wheel. We know each tooth is 10 degrees, and we have a fairly large range up to 30 degrees, plus or minus 195. So we need to rotate our engine back roughly 19.5 teeth, because that will be 195 degrees. Before top dead center, we will mark, drill and tap our bolt, and then from there, I'm going to get a transfer bolt. I need to pick one up and I'll show you. It's really cool. You thread it in and it has a sharp point. We then will bolt the timing cover on, mark on the timing cover where we need to drill for the sensor, drill and tap for the sensor, and then all our sensors are in place and we just need to wire a lot more. You know, who would have thought being the first to put Holley EFI on a Ferrari would have some complications? You know, I figured they sell bolt-in kits, right? Bolt-in, it's a V8, right? No, I totally knew this was going to be a pain in the butt. So I've saved you a lot of the trouble while I've spent most of the day just fidgeting everywhere, trying to figure out where to put it. And we now have the best solution, so we're going to execute. So we'll pick you up as we make some progress. We now have our hole in this cam gear, and it has been properly tapped out to the 1/4-20 that we will need for, there it is, our magnet bolt. Then the next step is getting the hole in the timing cover. And that's one where you can blindly guess and drill, or you can use a really cool technique. You can buy tools that will go into holes and have transfers, or you cut the head off a bolt and you sharpen the point and give a couple taps, and now I have the mark where we need to drill the hole. So we drill out that hole, size it for our cam sensor, and then we will lock our bolt down. We will measure the proper depth and get the right air gap the best that we can. Then we're in the home stretch of wiring, and running a Ferrari on Holley EFI is like in the super near future. I'm kind of excited, even though I have to drive the car with the shifter under my knee. It's not fun to drive for 6'7". Like it doesn't work. It was made for the average Italian man in the 70s who was not 6'7". All right, we've got to update you on more progress, and I'm actually really excited. This is all worked out, and now we're down to just the simple things, you know, like finishing the install, but we have a cam sensor mounted. So let me show you. In that last footage, you saw me drill some holes and working with a grinder, and that's because I was repurposing what they call a T-nut, kind of the half-moon nut, from the adjuster to act as a backer in the Ferrari timing cover for the sensor to thread into. And that is exactly what we ended up with. We have our transfer. I wanted it to land right between these ribs so we didn't have to modify the cover too much. And we have the cam sensor installed. We've got our flying magnet in position. So what I actually want to do is if we take this, we turn this all the way down till it basically bottoms out. Because when you're setting this, you normally have to do it with feeler gauges and be very accurate. The problem is, well, I can't put a feeler gauge behind all of this. So I'm going to show you how you can make that work. If you're ever in a position where you're putting fuel injection on a Ferrari or one of your non-supported applications and you're having to get your air gap right, this is a way to get it pretty much where it needs to be. Here's how we're going to make it work, and it's math. So if we come here, again, this was a big block Chevy mount kit, and they're telling you real nice and easy, just go in there with your feeler gauge, and we want to have 040 to 080 of clearance. There's no way for me to do that, but what we do know is this thread pitch of the sensor is M12 by 1.0, and what that means is every revolution of the sensor is 1 millimeter. 1 millimeter is roughly 03913 and change inches. So to get 040 to 080 of what they're asking, we just need to back the sensor out 1.5 turns. And that's going to move it 1.5 millimeters off of our magnet that we're gently bottomed against right now. And then we can lock it down. And we know we should have roughly 060, which is exactly in the middle of their air gap. So we know we can go in a little and out a little as we need. And then I'll set the time lapse up again because it's a lot more wiring ahead of us. And then we'll fire this thing into life. So I've got things kind of messy back here, but everything is more or less where it needs to land. We have our HP ECU. This is an aftermarket TAC driver. The Holley is able to produce the signal and modify the signals you need, but the TAC of our Ferrari up there is designed to run directly off ignition coil, so the ECU level signals aren't strong enough, so you need amplifiers. We have our nice solid state relay. That's going to live right there. Right now, that's only going to be controlling our fuel pump, and I went way over the top with fancy 4-gauge feeding it. That is also where our coils and fuel system gets its relay power coming off of there. We've got that all set up, and everything's kind of in place. Our last 2 wires are just simple check engine light and cooling fan control, which we can do later, because I'm at the point I want to get my laptop hooked up, and we can start configuring and get ready to start. Inside here, this is still kind of a mess because it needs to find its final landing. We have fuel pressure sensor, map sensor, fuel pressure sensor. Our intake air temperature will live right here in the air box. I have our throttle actually opening closer to wide open. The way it was, the conversion, it would actually only stop, come on, in the hole. Well, anyway, there's throttle blades down there, and it would only open about 70%. We can now get nearly fully 100%. The problem is it gets a little sticky here, and the throttle cable itself is not quite doing everything it needs to. So we're going to have to figure out and fix all of that. So, something you should do if you are installing fuel injection before you power on, go ahead and unplug. What I'm going to do, I'm unplugging my ignition coils, I'm unplugging the fuel injectors, and I'm going to unplug my O2 sensor, because all of that needs to get configured in the software. If you leave your coils plugged in, they can actually burn up. If the computer doesn't know what style of coils are there yet, they run risk of being damaged. So don't have them plugged in. Fuel injectors, just leave them unplugged so they don't have a chance of running. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to put power to everything and start telling the computer how to run a Ferrari. So the very first thing that I need to do is go ahead and start to create the base calibration file, which is just a big process of slowly going through all of the options, telling it which sensors that I'm using, the displacement of the engine. We're going to let it know that we are using that NTK, not a Bosch sensor, and we're planning to use a direct 60- to crank wheel with a single pulse cam zeroing. We do that, we're going to set the injectors that are as close that we can. Unfortunately, we don't have the exact calibration table, so we're going to just work with what we've got. Worst case, I'll get a set of Hollies so I know we have the exact data that we need. And once we have all of our sensors and rough stuff kind of put together, we're going to go through and set the correct firing order, which again, the Ferrari uses a unusual one. We're going to configure our output, let it know which one is our warning for the check engine light and where to turn on the cooling fans. We still need to get those wired in. And then once that's all done, it's a matter of updating the firmware on our new ECU. And then we go ahead and upload our map, work through a couple things, and then get connected to the computer to see live data, do our TPS auto set, and then it's time to turn the trigger. All right. Moment of truth. You can tell by the hair. It has been a long day. A lot of reading and rereading and double checking. But we have our map together. We're getting data. We're getting things ready. We have everything configured and a firing order set. Which means one thing. It's time. Hopefully. Hopefully it's time. If we notice in here, I've got some of the interior part 2 because we were having to check and configure some things, but we're going to reach through to this key. Key is on, and oh, come on, key. There. Welcome to the shop. I'm Jared, and this is Wrench Every Day. And if we take a short trip back in time, you'll remember a group of 4 friends and myself had the terribly questionable idea of entering a cross-country race in a short bus. And not only did we finished quite well and had a ton of fun doing that. But Cannonball history is filled with questionable vehicle choices. It's maybe a little bit partial for me to say the school bus was number 1, but a very well-known questionable vehicle is the Brock Yates Hal Needham ambulance, the Metavan. This one isn't it. It is probably the most accurate recreation of one ever made. It belongs to a good friend, Travis Bell, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of history why this van is so cool and what makes it special. Now, most questionable ideas tend to begin, well, around a few adult beverages, if we're honest, and Hal Needham and Brock Yates were sitting around a bar when Hal suggested the idea to enter their 1979 C2C run, the last that they were officially doing, in an ambulance. Who is going to pull an ambulance over racing across the country with a patient? So they tracked down probably the most difficult, least desirable Dodge van that they could have found, a 78 B200.
They ordered it, the orange and the white, Spinnaker white and Sunrise orange. You can order a van that ugly that year. They ordered it, they shipped it to Bill Mitchell's shop in Connecticut.
Which was then outfitted with a 502 cubic inch Mopar Dick Landy built engine, which is basically a NASCAR spec engine from the time. Lots of horsepower in a van meant to go fast. The problem is, due to build schedules, there wasn't much testing done. It basically showed up to the Goodwife shopping center where they punched in their start clock and made 50 feet, where it broke down, and Hal went and spent a lot of money. Some guys broke into an auto parts store and they got it going, and they were able to take off out of the parking lot sideways.
They were gone. And that thing was on rails. And the original ambulance got pulled over in New Jersey by Mark Finnick, and they had to let him go because the story that they tell in the movie is basically the same story that was told by Lyle Royer. They said they had to get the senator's wife to UCLA because she had cysts on the walls of her lungs. And that's what happened. So they drove it all the way across the United States.
All the way to the finish line. Not of the race, to their own finish line, the Wagon Wheel Cafe at the Palm Desert in Arizona. It's where those dinosaurs are kind of historically known for, you know, out in the desert. It's just a cool little spot. And well, they stopped there and the van proceeded to catch fire. The fire went out and it was towed to the finish line. So, being a big fan of the van, the Cannonball movie, Travis went out and found himself one of these vans, something that was very easy to do.
In 1978, the Dodge van had a major overhaul. They had a bigger turn signal, a recessed door handle, a larger rear taillight, and Brock Yates, Hal Needham decided to use a 78. Not only that, it's a sliding door with barn doors on the back, and a Sportsman with a sunroof, which is the hardest thing on God's green earth. I can find you as many 69 Dodge Charger Daytonas or Superbirds that you would like, but I beg of you to go find me a 78 Dodge B200, 6-window slider with barn doors.
And fully recreated, he regularly harassed Brock Yates for all the little details to make it, again, as absolutely perfect as possible. The problem is he made it too perfect. When you follow the recipe that didn't work the first time, it's probably not going to work the second time. So trying to write the did not finish of the first Transcon Medevac, they set out and didn't even start. The van broke down and couldn't even make it the 50 feet of the first one. So they took it back to the drawing board, fixed a few more things, modernized a couple additional components of the van, and then set out and got about halfway across the country in the third attempt, where it broke down once again. And that brings us to today, when sitting around a campfire, possibly some beverages involved, a group of us talking with Travis said, we are going to help. We are going to get this van, we are going to modernize, even more modernize, all of the fuel injection systems that we can. We are going to fix some of the other small problems. So hopefully, fourth time is the charm. You know, normally it's the third time. We're going for the fourth time. We are going to go through and do a lot of small upgrades and cleanup work that finally, this van will finally break the 50-year plus curse of never making it New York to LA.
So fingers crossed, we are going to get it across the line, and Ed and I will finally finish what they started in 1979.
So I'm gonna pick you guys up and we're gonna take a quick walk around the van. I'm gonna show you some of the really exciting attention to detail and features that went into it. Then we're gonna start taking it apart and we'll talk about some of the parts we're gonna put into it. The biggest thing when it comes to what we are trying to do in this van is build in redundancies. So if something breaks, it's very easily switched to a backup unit. You know, insurance. And I'll tell you what, when it comes to insurance, today's sponsor, Policy Genius, has help for you. Insurance is something you have to have. And in a world where everything just keeps getting more and more expensive, it's nice to have someone on your side trying to help you save money. That's what Policy Genius does. Policy Genius does all the work for you by comparing prices from all the top insurers to ensure you get the best coverage at the right price. Since 2014, Policy Genius has helped 30 million people shop for home and auto policies and helped place over $120 billion in coverage. Just like we made something amazing in Johnny Up Above Me by bundling Corvette suspension and an old international truck, Policy Genius can help you save a lot of money by bundling your home and auto insurance. Getting started is incredibly easy. First, head on over to policygenius.com/wrench, where you'll then answer a couple quick questions about yourself and your property. Policy Genius will then show you price estimates for policies that best fit your needs and help you find the best option. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies. If they find a policy with a better rate than what you're paying now, they'll do all the work to switch you for free. Policy Genius has saved customers an average of $1,250 over what they were paying on home and auto insurance. That's, like 2 tanks of diesel in the current market. So head on over to policygenius.com/wrench and get your free home and auto insurance quotes and see just how much you can save.
Okay, so we are handheld. I'd like to introduce everyone. This is David. He ran also during the 50th anniversary in what everyone dubbed the cheat DI, because it technically dynoed over 100 horsepower.
125, but we carried 240 pounds of concrete in the back seat.
To match the penalty for being overpower, and
10 pounds per horsepower.
And they finished first, him and Bradley, overall time winners.
Yep.
But the real winners of the event, there was a group of people that, 2 absolutely insane people. That wasn't a questionable idea. It was an insane idea that they finished this livery. The first time this livery has made it across the country in an event in a Suzuki Joy Pop. All right, but we are not here to talk about Joy Pops or our 50th anniversary run. We're here to finally help this break its 50th anniversary of failing to get across the country. One of the coolest features, we'll open up. Again, Travis was able to get the signatures of Brock Yates, Hal Needham, and Lady Pamela. Those, again, Brock is kind of the godfather of Cannonball. Hal is the original questionable idea facilitator. I guess if anyone signed the dash and the bus, Hal would be replaced with Henry, and JP would be Lady Pamela. But seeing those signatures there are absolutely phenomenal. We have this is a little checklist of things they wanted to improve, but this thing is just insane. So we've got the sunroof, we've got a fancy digital rear view mirror, we've got some countermeasures, we've got this big old command center here with the wheel-in sirens, we've got gauges everywhere, police scanners, like just phenomenal recreation. But where it gets really special, let's see, it is an ambulance. There is an actual gurney that straps down. You have patient monitoring, oxygen, breathing. The gauges there for the oxygen are voltmeters for the dual battery system in the vehicle. You have a power port to charge your phones and accessories, and I mean, it looks like a proper ambulance in there. Like, Travis did a good job, like, recreating that, right?
100%. This is as close as you could get while being that much better.
It's just a really cool thing here. But again, what really makes this special is its engine, right?
Oh, yeah.
We keep talking about it. So how about I'll stand by the exhaust and you go start this up. So, oh, that's right, 78 Dodge van.
This thing is violent.
It is just, it's silly to stand on the outside and just watch this thing rock back and forth. So ridiculous. We can go ahead and turn it off. So, if you're not too familiar with vans, much like the school bus, there's a dog box or a dog house that houses the engine. All of our work is going to be in there. We're going to be putting in a new fuel injection system. We're changing the fuel pump setup drastically because the fuel pump was the failure that put this thing on the side of the road in its last attempt. So
It's the bane of every cannonballer's existence, the fuel system.
yeah, heat on the fuel pump. So we're going to be changing that whole setup. But in order to do any of that, we have got to get this entire box and everything set up and moved back so we can have a little bit more room to start showing you some more of what is absolutely crazy on this. And then we'll start taking it apart and showing and comparing our new parts.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so when you look at the engine bay from the front here with the hood open, you see a real nice ram induction there. It takes a little bit of forced air, breathes it back to the air cleaner, and it looks like this is going to be a miserable time to work. Also, that's Dodge wiring. This is the Travis wiring. This is nice and clean. That's 1978 Dodge. So, you know, wire like this, not like that. But with the dog box and that out, we have got so much room for activity here, David.
Oh, yeah.
So we can see nice and plain this massive, massive engine. We've got the serpentine belt system. One other small repair that we're going to have to do, it's kind of hard to see right now, but there's a thermostat housing there that is leaking that we are going to replace. But the main thing we're doing is we're going to replace this fuel injection unit. We need better control, and there's a lot of limitations in this computer system that's on it. This is good for the weekenders, but if you need to go full throttle across the country, there might be something a little bit more robust available, and we're going to talk about that. Something else, it's kind of hard to see at this angle, but there, oh yeah, David will pick this up for us. Look at this ignition system. When we were talking about redundancy, I'm going to take as long as I can because this is really light.
This is historically accurate, too.
Yeah. There are two, basically NASCAR ignition boxes, two ignition coils. They go to this little ignition splitter, which then sends spark to that wire, which comes all the way and goes to the very front of it's like the longest coil wire ever.
Uh-huh.
So the problem with a wire this long, one, you can actually run into some spark latency when it gets to your distributor, so your timing can be a little bit off. Also, the spark from a spark plug wire makes a ton of electrical noise.
And having it
Here,
right underneath with all of these.
Yeah, all of your sensors and wires.
Police
It's not.
scanner.
Yeah, it's not the best. It just is going to make a lot. You can set that back down.
Okay, cool, thanks. It's really lightweight.
Yeah, I mean, it's not solid wood at all.
No.
So that runs all the way in the front because on a Mopar, your distributor lives in the very front. So now we can talk a little bit about what we're going to put in. So I'm going to grab a table so we can unbox new parts. Ooh. All right, here are the primary components that we're upgrading. Now there are a lot of other small things that we got from Holley, fuel lines and fittings and just the little stuff to make all of this connect together. But this is kind of the main basis of our upgrades. First, we have the Holley Sniper. What's great about the Holley Sniper EFI system is it's just a simple carb replacement. It will drop down, you connect a couple wires, and with an auto-tune feature, just about anyone can get it running on their engine. This is set up where we have slightly larger fuel injectors, and it's designed to carry a lot more fuel. Well, because that's not a stock engine. Your computers are actually built in to this unit. So other than a handheld O2 sensor and a couple small coolant temperature sensors, this is it for bolting onto an engine. But that likes a really nice, good, clean timing signal. So that's entering our HyperSpark. This is a really nice distributor. It's billet. it has our Hall effect sensor that generates the position sensor of the engine, which will then send to our Hyperspark module, which then generates the RPM signal back to the sniper. So these all work together. Then we've got this nice hot coil. This is, when your coil has a heat sink,
It's serious business.
it's going to send a real nice spark. Now, that fuel pump, that's a big fuel pump, right?
Oh yeah.
But that's not the fuel pump to feed the EFI. We're actually getting a different pump. They sent a really cool drop-in system. They have all kinds of options for factory kind of hot rod classic cars, but they didn't quite have what they sent. We didn't like. We wanted 2 fuel pumps because that's what broke it the first time.
Exactly. So by going away from, it currently has an external mounted fuel pump, like your hot rod guys will have like A1000s, things like that, or even Bosch 044 styles like this behemoth. We're going to an in-tank, sort of a Wabro style, like an OE style pump. So that way the failure rate on those is extremely low, they're very quiet, and they're extremely reliable.
Yeah. So by going to an internal pump setup, we are going to actually be able to use the fuel to cool the pumps.
Exactly.
So, but what this super high flow pump is for is our transfer pump. This pump supports 800 to 1,000 naturally aspirated horsepower. They complained about how long it took to get fuel from the auxiliary to the primary tank. So,
No more.
Ramrod,
It's coming.
it's going to transfer very quickly, so they'll have to watch the fuel gauge on the primary tank and shut that off pretty quickly. Otherwise,
They might be pouring gas out going down the road.
we're going to get the stuff on, start getting calibrated. So back inside the car.
Oh boy.
That escalated kind of quickly, huh?
Oh yeah.
So originally we were just going to change the throttle body fuel injection unit, and as you can tell, there's no intake manifold on it. And the reasoning for that is
The might as wells, but actually,
we're trying to make it a lot better. So I'll walk over there in a second and show you why we decided to pull it. But we also were noticing, Travis mentioned he had a slight coolant leak and got us a new thermostat housing, but what we actually found were these heater core hoses. This is a 3/4 hose on a 5/8 barb swollen, and this one here actually has a cut in it. So we're gonna have to pick up some new heater core hoses. We're gonna replace all of those, but let me walk you to the intake manifold. Now this is what you will call a dual plane intake, where essentially the air is flowing, it's kind of set up to be an equal runner at 2 different heights. But the problem is, with a throttle body fuel injection system, you need a perfect kind of balanced all of your cylinders together to generate a reference signal. With this big wall here, you're not able to get that. So some people will run, and this engine had a 1-inch spacer, which kind of helps balance it and work fairly well. But the problem is, in a very high performance application, that can cause problems. So we pulled this because I'm going to go through and actually machine this wall out. So it's almost like a single plane at top. It's going to make the throttle body much, much happier and give us a better signal. So I'm going to be grinding on that. David is going to work a little bit on the cooling system and pulling the rest of the old fuel injection system out and getting it ready for new wiring. We're going to just keep plugging away, getting some things more apart, a couple more parts ordered, waiting on things to come in, but it's looking promising. I'm feeling good about finding these small problems so we can make it perfect. And just like that, we have a single plane, sort of.
Yeah.
A full race.
Full race. We went from 3/4 straight to full race.
But we've got that wall fully knocked out, so it's going to marginally affect the performance of it as a dual plane, but it's going to actually make our vacuum reference
Much better at idle and stuff, and at low speed and stuff like that. So when the truck's cruising around, you don't end up with these weird like stumble spots, and it's like, oh wow, there's all this vacuum all of a sudden, and then there's not. And,
Well, and even still, at full throttle circumstances, if half of the engine is running ever so slightly different,
yeah, it'll throw it off.
It has no clue because it's only reading vacuum from 4 cylinders. So
Indeed.
this is the best way to do it. We are most likely going to run that and the spacer for clearance and for the ram air, but we know we have a good vacuum signal, but we've kind of hit the point of the project where it's like, all right, we're going to get this done and we're going to get that done, and then each one of those ends up needing one or two more parts. So we're basically at the point where we got a lot of parts, but it's late and the part store is closed, and we got to go in the morning to get it. We'll come around and actually show you what he's been working on. We've got the intake manifold back on with the new gasket after porting, and David has gotten the Sniper installed, right? It's ready to start.
Right, yeah. Totally.
So we've got it in. We've changed a couple of the sensors over. We discovered that the van was never going full throttle.
That was nice.
So you could go 70%, but not 100%. So we've made some adjustments in the throttle linkage. So it now will... well, you can't quite see. There's not enough light, but believe me, it goes full throttle. And we're working on the regulator setup. The old one was internally regulated, and it didn't work right.
No, it was somewhere between 70 and 85 pounds, whatever it felt like.
Yeah, PSI of fuel pressure, which generally we're going to set between 43 and 50 PSI static. The way the fuel pressure regulator will work is you have fuel go in, and then there's a spring diaphragm that you can adjust the tension on top, and once it reaches the desired pressure, it goes out. So you'll sometimes set this up to where it will go in to your unit, your fuel injection rail or whatever, then come into this and you'd block off a port. The way we're going to do it is we're going to have our fuel come into one side, tee off also going to the front, and deadhead in, and create the pressure we need to open the diaphragm, and it will return out of the bottom. Yeah. So we're just, again, trying to make things as reliable as possible. We're at the point where we're going to run some of the wires, get some of that set up, plan out, hopefully, our last summit run. We've got our new fancy fuel pump showing up today.
Yep.
So that's where we're at. And if you noticed in that last stretch, it was almost exclusively David working. And it's not because I wasn't working. I was doing something else.
Yeah.
So sneak peek, there's a CarTrek car out there that needed a whole lot of love to get ready for filming. So that's what I was doing while David was cleaning up the wiring, because believe it or not, despite it being a van, there's not room for two of us in there. All right, so we are jumping a couple weeks ahead. We had CarTrek, David had racing and race cars to tune, but we are back on the van. So we're gonna get you caught up with some of the new parts that we got that we didn't have, decided we want, because again, this thing has failed so many times. we want to make it fail to fail, right?
Exactly.
So one thing we have sitting here is a fuel tank. That is a newer tank from a standard EFI that Travis got us. It is for a fuel injected van, but we didn't like that, right?
Yeah, because of this super slick setup that Holley makes. It's designed to retrofit into any old hot rod tank.
Yeah, so this is a twin pump design, and again, the engine doesn't make the horsepower to need two of those.
Not even one of them.
Yeah, well, one is more than enough for what horsepower this makes, but we wanted redundancies. That what stopped the van before was a fuel pump failure. Really, just going internal is good enough.
Yeah,
but
to an OEM style, continuous duty rated, silent, fuel cooled,
not sitting directly over an exhaust. And we're deciding to retrofit it into this tank. And again, this setup is designed where if you've got a fuel tank and the ability to put a 4-inch hole in the top of it, you can have this pump.
Exactly.
So this is designed that it has this nice large cushion. When you start tightening, these bolts and wings will come out and actually clamp it down. And then if it's not deep enough, hey, nice shirt. Go to Bunker Branding and you can get one of your own. But if you need to shorten this up a little bit more, these can be cut if it's not deep enough. But it's just an awesome way to get EFI in any vehicle that they don't offer a tank. Now, honestly, Holley has a ton of tanks available. They don't have one for that thing. So we're gonna make this work. So that's one thing I'm gonna do is drill that hole out, and we're gonna mount it in this vent and rollover valve because we have vent provisions built into this. And then we are going to run our braided lines over the tank, and then there's a little frame pass through about here. What we're doing very differently in the fuel system is something that you picked up. So on the floor, this is the old setup, rubber hose front to back. What we are doing is overkill. This is actual fuel line. So all we're going to end up having is 2 short whips of braided stainless steel coming from the tank and the fuel pumps to that. And then 2 at the front that go to the fuel pressure regulator and to the throttle body. Just nice and simple. Less chance for leaking and failure. And again, we are trying to make the van fail to fail. So we're still finishing up a little bit of the wiring removal. We are still waiting on our valve covers to get in, and then we're getting a drive shaft made in the morning because, again, our drive shaft was too short. So we've got to get the gear vendors out. I've got to drill the fuel tank, and still lots of wiring. So we're going to set up cameras and, yeah, just get to work. Let's get you caught up on some of the things that happen to this fuel tank before I get it stuck back in, because once it's in, you're not going to see anything. We have got that Holley conversion pump mounted in. It was incredibly easy. Again, it's cut a 4-inch hole, measure your depth, and then you turn those 4 locks in. Oh, it's going to be real windy. Sorry, it's a beautiful day and we've got the door open. But You turn those lock, torque it down to, they give you the range 40 to 60 inch-pounds. And then I've got my lines just kind of roughly made so that way we can feed them through. And then I'm going to run our power. I went kind of overkill, used some of the Holley abrasion and fire shield, put a connector on it that, you know, it's overkill. Overkill's better than not enough. So we'll get that run. So this tank is ready to go back in. We also had new transmission cooler lines made. This is a 2,250 PSI working range. They burst at about 10,000 PSI, going to a thermostat to that transmission cooler underneath. Again, it's just the principle of no more failures. We currently have that new drive shaft being made, which, guess what? It's kind of overkill. We've working on the plumbing a little bit. You can kind of see the hard lines just loosely stuck in place. We still need to kind of pull and blow those out and get fittings on them, but it's just a bunch of little things. So we're gonna just keep on little thinging our way through it and running around to try to get this ridiculous van back to ambulancing. So underneath, it's set to David height. This is just kind of loose run. We're going to still a dowel clamp, right?
A dowel, yes. We're gonna roll them right in the deep.
We're gonna anal clamp it up so it sits nice like it's supposed to, and instead of just rubber. That's kind of how you should really do it. We've got the tank in, and this is just roughed in. They're not tight just yet, which we will forget about and then turn the key on and spray fuel all over everything, all right? Because that's what you do.
Predictably, every time.
We come out from the pump. We've got our nice Holley filter mounted with, you know, my real pretty arrows to confirm the arrow we're covering. This will loop and get secured up, and then it meets our hard line and then that hard line back. This still needs its bracket made, but again, we went past 11 all the way to 12 or 13 on those transcooler lines, huh?
Yeah. Better heat and abrasion resistance than like the usual parts store transcooler lines. I mean, these could take a rock, an angle grinder.
This is basically built to be on a farm implement and just abused. So they're 2,250 PSI of working pressure, which means almost, if not a little bit more than 10,000 PSI burst pressure. And have you ever seen a Dodge 727 Torque Flight make 400 PSI? So we're
easily 10 times the amount of working pressure that it'll see.
All right, so it's the next day. More parts have been gotten, and one of the big things is that big, beautiful drive shaft, 4-inch aluminum, upgraded U-joints front and rear. We've got 1350s in the front, 1332 big Dodge in the rear. So this is little Dodge. That is big Dodge. Lighting is just being a mess, but let's see if we can try to... There you go. So you can see how much smaller the old U-joint was in comparison to what we've got going on. Now, of course, this is still a Dodge 8 1/4, so it can explode at any given moment, but we are no longer running the baby joint. The other big reason we wanted to do this is there wasn't a way to go to a Dodge joint to an American, like a Spicer 1310, 1330, without having a greasable joint. Now, I know what you're going to say. Greasable joints, it sounds like a good thing. It's something you can service, you can lubricate your U-joints, but when you start making a lot of power, having the hollow sections of that U-joint to allow grease to travel through actually weaken the joints substantially. So you want solid joints, and it's just something where you have the expectation of replacing more than greasing and lubing, and it's just, again, a matter of strength. It doesn't seem like much when you have a joint that's gun drilled, but all of those little bits of metal can equate to a broken and catapulting drive shaft. Something else we've got done is our gear vendors is back in there. We went through the process of having to make a gasket because unfortunately when this separated, it tore, but we were able to go through with the small hammer, transfer paper, cut, draw, and we've got that there. We have a new seal and a new bushing, and it's ready to receive that shaft. So aluminum is great. This, even though it's bigger and technically longer than the old one, it weighs less than that steel shaft. We're going to get proper engagement on the yoke and hopefully no more vibrations while this thing's running at speed. Also last night we got power run to the pumps. We've got a lot of wiring, those valve covers going in there. There's just a tremendous amount of work to do. So we're gonna get back to doing it. Well, turns out that something I was a little bit worried about ended up being something we really should be worried about and has stopped the medevac in its tracks. The van that never fails to fail is failing, but we're going to fix it. It just unfortunately means we're not ending the episode with big burnouts. That's what David really wanted to do. He likes getting me in trouble with the landlord. So, the smart among you, and I won't say smart, the educated in gear vendors among you would have noticed a small problem. That gasket we made, and I was thinking it could be a problem. When I took it apart, I saw very exacting shims, and what did you find out when Rick from Gear Vendors called you back?
So the material that the gaskets are made of, that for the gear vendors, they're a non-compressible style gasket.
and are effectively part of the shim.
They're extremely important, yeah. They have a very exacting tolerance. You can't just go to the parts store and slap some old gasket maker in there. It just doesn't work that way.
So this gets to come back out and apart, and turns out we can get this part. It's a semi-universal part. Those two gaskets, not so much. So they're coming, but we can't get them in time. But man, look at that shaft.
Look at this hotness.
I mean, I covered that while you were running for parts. But what that means is today was our deadline to try to wrap it up, because you have an important date. You're going to go see Garth Brooks.
Yeah. Girlfriend got me tickets to it. It's going to be it's going to be a time. It'll be a good time.
I was going to say, she's going to probably watch this. You want to be more excited.
Yeah.
So to make sure David doesn't end up single, I don't want to be the cause of that again. We're going to have to end with the stupid thing having to come back apart. We've got like 4 wires left to hook up and fluids to put in this thing, and then we're going to be driving it. So, not today, because that's just how the van life is going to be. So our next time, when we can get David up here in a couple days and we can get parts in from Rick at Gear Vendors. So thank you, Rick, for helping us out. We just time frames kind of ruined us. We're going to get this thing running, and we're actually going to take you a little bit more into the tuning process, and we're actually going to get a lot of seat time in this thing rather than just a quick burnout. So it's more fun for all of us, and I hate ending episodes on disappointment, but hey, it's not disappointing. We learned, David. We learned that
knowing is half the battle.
Yeah, knowing. Oh well, we're gonna get back to this van. You guys are gonna have a lot of wrenching that you've already watched, and more to watch coming up on the next Medevac episode. You know, that's how it goes. So yeah, I'm Jared, reminding you to always make questionable choices, and if your friend has a van that needs some help, just buy everything. Don't assume anything's gonna be good. It needs it all. We'll see you. Welcome to the shop. I'm Jared, and this is Wrench Every Day. And today we get a second chance at getting this thing working. If you remember last time, when we had this 1978 Dodge B200 Sportsman van done up just like Brock Yates and Hal Needham's Cannonball Run, we hit a wall. We were making good progress. We had a big mega episode, lots of exciting content for you. And we wanted to end it with going down the highway and burnouts and exciting stuff, and, well, it was just disappointment. We hit a wall because our Gear Vendors unit underneath it, which is an aftermarket overdrive, needed a gasket. I made a gasket, but had some concern that it needed to be a very precise thickness, and, well, turns out it did. It does have a very special gasket that I now have in my hands, bespoke just for that unit there gasket. Bespoke. Why is that familiar? Oh yeah, today's sponsor, Bespoke Post. Bespoke Post is a monthly membership club delivering top shelf goods from off-the-radar brands. It's free to join. You can skip a month or cancel anytime. Every month, Bespoke Post introduces its members to cool new products. Outdoor gear, barware, home and kitchen goods, clothing, and more. Even live oysters, if that's something you're into, based on a preference quiz you fill out. Every box has around $70 worth of goods inside, but only costs you a fraction of that value. You'll get a box assigned to you, and before it ships, you'll get a preview of what comes inside, and you'll get to decide if you want to 1. Keep it, 2. Swap it for a different box, or 3. Skip the month entirely for no charge. You only pay for what you want.
I've got 3 of the boxes that I was really excited to get. I've got Tooled, I've got Switchback, and I've got Aged, and let's talk about them. Tooled comes with 3 quick portable tools that you should always have at your side. First, we've got a 13-piece bit driver set with a built-in carrying case, pocket holder, magnet clip, everything you want in a quick, convenient bit driver set. Next, you've got a pen flashlight, something that's always convenient, nice and compact, easy to carry. And the last part of the kit is a 10-foot braided paracord keychain, something you should always have with you. If you're ready to start hiking, Switchback is the box for you. Comes with a tri-fold shovel that I think a lot of people don't realize you can set it up like that and kind of do some chopping and digging motion. You get a nice, high-quality compass. It's been a long time since I've been in Boy Scouts, but there's some glow-in-the-dark things, and it'll help you find your way. You got a fire starter, you've got a small little lantern, and last that you need in your backpack is a good quality knife. Now, the last box that I was really excited to get a hold of was one called Aged. What's really neat about Aged is you get these awesome whiskey glasses that naturally stir, and it also comes with these really neat aging sticks, a cheesecloth filter. These were some boxes I was real excited to get. Which ones are you going to? To get 20% off your first box, click the link in the description box below and enter code WRENCH20 during checkout, or head on over to bespokepost.com/wrench20. So along with the parts for our gear vendor, so I can take it back apart and put it back together the correct way, we're going to go ahead and finish up some of the engine wiring and installation that we need to do there. We've got some improved spark plug wires. Again, we're trying to do overkill on everything. And for those of you who might be wondering, David did get home in time to go to that Garth Brooks concert. Each their own. So, real quick, for those of you who have not seen the first episode on this yet, you really probably should. There's a lot of history that goes into what this van is and why it's kind of special and why I'm excited working on it. But the super condensed version is this was created to compete in a cannonball run, a race from New York to LA. Not very legal. Probably shouldn't do it. We do support questionable choices, and I don't like being a hypocrite, so do what you want to. But at any rate, this was made to run in the final C2C Baker run, 1979. Failed miserably. Travis Bell rebuilt this thing, perfect replica, and it's failed miserably every time since. So we are now going through to make it so it can finally actually complete a run, because it was a promise from Travis Bell to Brock Yates that this van will make the run. So we're just trying to help a real good friend fulfill a promise. But we're going to go ahead and get started into working on this, so we'll get it back in the air, gear vendors on the table, then just a whole lot more wiring and exciting things, and we are going to drive this van. This episode. It's going to happen because I don't think David has any more